Kate Donovan of Fried, the Burnout Podcast, started her podcast to help finish a book. And then all of this happened.
I didn't start a podcast for business purposes. It wasn't until the podcast was out for a year that people started contacting me for coaching. And I was like, oh, that's marketing. Like, it wasn't the reason that I started it though. So it didn't occur to me for the first year that I could even use it that way.
Why did you start it then?
Because my dead grandmothers told me to.
Explain.
I had just moved back to the States and I was planning on opening an acupuncture office and I was getting our lives organized. My husband got back, started working right away. I had probably 6 to 8 weeks to just sort of like find us an apartment, get us furniture, undo all the other stuff. Yep. And as I was doing those things, I was also found my new favorite exercise class, ruptured my Achilles, was going to be unable to open an acupuncture practice because I wasn't going to be able to stand or walk or move. Right. So now all of a sudden I'm in bed. I have no way of changing any of this. And I went to bed bawling, crying, asking my dead grandmothers, ladies, what am I going to do? Yeah. Like, what am I going to do during this time? And they were like, well, finish your book, first of all. And I woke up with a ticker tape across my head that just said Fried, the Burnout Podcast. Well, actually, originally it was Fried, the Ultimate Guide to Burnout Podcast. And I shortened it since that time, but I couldn't get it out of my brain. And when I realized it, what I realized was that doing the podcast and doing interviews would allow me to write a better book. Right. Because I would have more information than just my information. It's not just my story. It's the story of 35 other women. So I did 35 interviews in 5 weeks and kicked off the podcast and finished my book.
This is part of Podcast to Connect. We're in the middle of a season right now where we're following April from Doorkey Podcast through a series of kind of like mini coaching sessions where we're working through her audience growth. The entire season is focused on audience growth for her history podcast. It's an entire season. We're at episode 2. It'll go to episode 8 by the end of the year. So please do join us for that.
That's a lot. Okay. So the first 35 episodes were that. And then after that, was there something that happened that you thought, this is different than I was expecting?
Well, first I had a lot more fun with it than I realized. So that was part one. This was super fun. I really enjoyed it. Then it started to grow. And I remember thinking, like, if I get to 10,000 downloads ever, I will die. Like, I'll die.
Ever.
Ever. And now we're doing 10,000 downloads every other week. And it's a very, very different experience. But at the time I was like, this is wild. And it just kept sort of growing. Like, it just was just happening. And I was like, and then people started calling me for coaching. And I was like, oh, I can do that on purpose. Maybe I should tell people.
Yeah.
That I do that.
Let's go back to the beginning of the podcast. You started it to get more interviews and whatnot for the book. But was there, like, why did you even think of a podcast? Like, were there any podcasts that inspired you that you thought, I can do that, I want to do that? Or was it something else?
No, I had done one briefly in the past and didn't go well. I was only doing solo episodes. I couldn't figure it out. I sounded like a robot. It was terrible. And so I had already sort of had a tiny bit of exposure to it. And outside of that, no, it was literally my dead grandmothers told me to do it. And I listened. That was that. Like, exactly. I don't know how many downloads my podcast has total because I've used a couple of different posts over the years. And some of them I thought I downloaded before I left and didn't. So I could be at 1 million already and I wouldn't even know.
Yeah.
My guess is that I'm probably around 750.
Yeah.
But it could be at 500. It could be at 1 million. I don't know. And people are like, well, how are you going to celebrate crossing the 1 million mark? I'm like, well, maybe I'll just wait until the numbers I have now get to 1 million.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't care.
Exactly. I think But if you need to celebrate something like that with a business podcast, I think years of doing it is probably more appropriate. But
Yeah.
just, I mean, I don't think any
Like,
of that
I
really
don't know.
needs to happen.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Like, whatever. And I was real upset about that for a while.
Mhm.
I don't know how many downloads I have. It's an easy promo
Mhm.
moment when
Yeah.
you hit a mark, because you
Mhm.
can say, look, I did this thing, and people are like, wow, must be good. I guess, like it's a good promo thing to do.
Yeah.
But as soon as I've just realized that, okay, well, I'm gonna lose that one promo thing that I do once a year.
Yeah.
It's like, actually, maybe not as impactful as I imagined. Well, how about I just roll that back a little? Like, slow
Yeah.
down, Kate.
And you can estimate if you kind of remember what they were. I mean, if you
Ish.
really need to.
I
I
actually
mean,
took the numbers. I had some estimates up that I kept up on my pegboard behind my desk for a while, and I
Yeah.
took them down this weekend when I did I did a decluttering this weekend, and I took them down, and I was like, I don't actually care about this.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Because you've gotten clearer about what does.
Yeah, what are we
Yeah.
measuring? Right now we're measuring people that enter our online course.
Mhm.
That's what we're measuring.
Yep.
So I don't care if 5 people are listening or 500,000.
But we do. If it's just
Yeah,
5, we do.
for
'Cause
that.
they're not gonna all convert. Yeah.
Right. But who the thing is, when I had when I was signing the most coaching clients,
Yeah.
the numbers that I don't even want anymore, I was probably at around like 75 to 150 downloads a month. But the people that were listening
Mhm.
found me right from the beginning,
Yeah.
and were very invested.
Yep.
And that was that.
Yep.
And there wasn't any other help around at that time for burnout.
Mhm.
Nothing else really existed at that time. So
Right.
I was their only option. I was the only podcast, and I was their only option.
Yeah.